How do I let go of old thought patterns? So our thought patterns essentially are our beliefs about what is true with regards to ourselves, with regards to the world, how it works, the nature of reality as we see it. So they are the assertions that we make. They are based on memory, which means that we have experiences, and from those experiences we derive certain rules or laws about life. These beliefs that we hold determine the inner narrative of our life and the choices that we make. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So we're familiar with the receipt, reaction, response mechanism of how we gain our experiences. We receive stimuli from the external environment, and then we react with those stimuli at the level of the mind, so that's our feelings and emotions, and at the level of the intellect, which is our thoughts. So this is what we mean by the narrative. It's the meaning that we derive from our experiences. It's the story that we tell ourselves about what is happening. Once we have reacted with the stimuli from our environment, we then respond back into the environment with our choices. An example will make this a bit clearer in a moment. Like all of our beliefs, they are partially wrong and partially right. And they are a mixture of what you might call conscious and blind. They, to some extent, are known to us. I know what I think. I know what I believe. I know what I'm reacting from. And there'll also be drives and beliefs within the personality that we are blind to, but that are nonetheless still functioning in that way to determine the reaction and the choices that we're making. So in a sense there, we're being controlled by something that we're not aware of. And they are self-reinforcing. They tend to continue to exist in the sense that we look for things in the external environment that justify our beliefs. We cherry pick pieces of information coming to us and say, see, I told you, I knew that was the case. And again, both consciously and unconsciously. So in a sense, we can think of them as lenses through which we are viewing reality. So you're familiar with the phrase rose-colored glasses. That's talking about someone who has a thought pattern, an underlying belief of optimism. People are basically good, the world is basically good, and good things are going to happen. If someone has a jealous disposition, you might say they have green-colored glasses, and so on. Other types of lenses that are coloring the reality that comes through to us. Why would we want to let go of our thought patterns? Fundamentally, they limit our ability to live as freely as we would wish. And let's explain this by looking at a couple of examples. So if someone picks up the underlying belief that people are critical and selfish, how might this work? So let's say we have, first of all, a situation. It could be at your workplace, it could be at a school, it could be in a social environment or a home. You're doing something, trying to achieve some end point with some activity that you're in. Someone comes along with some knowledge, expertise, some wisdom in that same activity. They see you struggling and they want to give you some kindly advice to help you along so that you can be more competent, more proficient, and so that you can enjoy the activity more. So it's genuinely well-meaning advice that could be useful to you. Now, because you have no underlying thought patterns here that are getting in the way, when you see that, you receive that clearly. There's a feeling of connection. What's the narrative you tell yourself? This person is trying to help me. Good. What's the response that you make? You thank them. You continue to talk about it. There is reciprocation. Now let's say I'm in the same environment and I have this underlying thought pattern of people are critical and selfish. That lens colors what I'm seeing. So if I have that as an underlying belief, kindly advice now doesn't seem like that. It seems to me like a deliberately hurtful criticism. How do I react to that? With resistance. What's the story I tell myself? This person's trying to hurt me. This person's trying to bring me down. How do I respond? Conflict. Let's take a second example. Let's say that I have the thought pattern, failure is catastrophic. Okay, now let's first take someone who doesn't have that. They are clear in their life, and again, it's work, education, family, social life, relationships. There's an opportunity. They see it as such, they evaluate it, they take the risk, try to grab the opportunity, and there is success. Okay, now let's say I have the thought pattern, failure is catastrophic. I see an opportunity arise. Now this time I do see it as an opportunity. I don't misread it. But my reaction is one of fear. What if I fail? What will people think of me? As a consequence, I choose not to act on all the opportunities that arise in front of me, and I stagnate. So when we talk about letting go of thought patterns, what does that actually mean? Letting go of them simply means putting beliefs in their proper place. In fact, you can't let go of anything. But what you can do is put effort into reaching towards things that are more true and more accurate. And as you reach towards higher truths, these lower truths start to naturally fall away, or you see them in their proper perspective. So let's continue with these two examples. People are critical and selfish. Some people are critical and selfish. There's some truth to it. Also, some people are neutral, and some people are actively unselfish. That's more true. Imagine if you hold that belief instead of all people are critical and selfish. The problem with our beliefs being partially right and partially wrong only arises when we take our beliefs to be absolutely true. There's nothing wrong with thinking some people are critical and selfish. It's when we make it absolute that the problem arises. So what's more true again? It's actually more true that everyone is a mixture of all three temperaments at different times in different environments with different relationships. Sometimes I am selfish and critical. Sometimes I'm pretty neutral if I don't really know the person. And sometimes I'm actively unselfish trying to help. Take our second example. Failure is catastrophic. Now, to an extent, that's true because there is loss associated with failure. I put my time, my energy, my resources, my money on the line. If I don't get what I was striving for, I have lost that. That's true. But what's more true? There's also gain. I've gained experience. I know things about that activity I didn't know before. I've gained wisdom. I know that I won't do that next time. I've gained connections with people, with organizations, with other aspects of my environment. So that's more true. What's more true again is that there is a greater loss in not trying. Stagnation. So you can see how these underlying beliefs of people are critical and selfish, failure is catastrophic, they haven't been completely discarded. They've simply been put into their proper perspective. So this is all very well and good, but how do we do it? How do we let go of these thought patterns? There's a few aspects we want to cover. The first is understanding. We can't move beyond a limiting belief until we first conceive of doing so. So that means we need to understand the nature of thought patterns themselves, what they are, their causes and their effects, what letting go of them means and how to do it. So we've touched on that already through this. The second aspect is reflecting on higher values. So that's what we've already been doing a little bit here. A higher value is a higher belief. What do we mean by higher? A higher belief is one that is more accurately reflective of reality. All people are critical and selfish. It's not very reflective of reality. Some people are critical and selfish. That's a much more accurate description of the truth, of the world around us. Failure is catastrophic. In some cases it will be. If you fail to calculate the numbers correctly for a bridge, there may be a catastrophe. In some cases, failure will be catastrophic. But it's not absolutely true. So when we talk about reflecting on higher values, it doesn't just mean these specific instances that we're describing here. What it means is having a regular study practice where you expose yourself to universal truths about life, about the human composition, what we're made up of, how the body, mind, and intellect function, what growth is, how to get there. So it's exposing ourselves and integrating truths that are more universal rather than personally true for me. So I won't go into that here. Elsewhere we've spoken about what it means to have a regular study practice. But whatever we're doing through that practice, the core of it is that we are looking to determine for ourselves what is true, what is real, what is genuinely meaningful in life. Second aspect of letting go of thought patterns is practice. So we've first of all got a body of understanding around thought patterns and around higher values. With that understanding, we start to identify our existing beliefs. So the process of identifying our thought patterns is self-reflection or introspection. We're looking inwardly. And the way that we do that is to start with our behavior. Remember, receipt, reaction, response. If we simply say, what are my underlying beliefs? It's a very difficult and murky place to start looking. Actions, choices, behaviors, these are much easier to look at. And so we will start to look at areas of our behavior that to our own mind and intellect seem to be troubled, challenging. So what we're doing essentially is having a Q&A session with ourselves. It's the intellect speaking to the mind. So there's a series of questions we can ask. What we then do once we've identified these beliefs is to consciously put them to the test. There's two ways to do that. One is to question them, as we talked about. The next thing to do is to put those beliefs to the test, which means consciously doing the thing that you don't want to do, that your thought pattern or underlying belief would tell you not to do. So let's go through a worked example, just very briefly. This won't be as complete as you might do it in real life with yourself, but it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. So let's start with the thought pattern, failure is catastrophic. Start with behavior. What am I doing? I'm saying no to opportunities when they arise. I'm giving excuses as to why I'm not going to try the thing which is available in front of me. So you flesh that out as much as you can. Give a full description of the actions that you're choosing, the things that you are doing. Second part of this is, why am I doing it? So we can kind of break that up into a couple of aspects. What am I trying to gain and what am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to gain out of this? Well, I'm trying to gain a sense of safety, security. I'm trying to stay with what I know, with what is familiar. What am I trying to avoid? Failure. So once we've got those ideas, we start to question them. What makes this important? We can start to play the so what game. What am I trying to gain and avoid? Safety, security. I'm trying to avoid failure. What makes this important? Well, because people will see me fail and I will see myself failing. So what? People will think I'm a failure and I will think I'm a failure. So what? I'll be rejected by others. I'll be alone, without friends, without a community. I'll be embarrassed in front of myself and embarrassed to go in front of other people. I'll be uncovered as a fraud, as incompetent. So what? So what if all that happens? Okay, so you can see how this process continues onwards. We're continuing to look for reasons that the mind is giving. At some point, you might ask yourself the question, so what? Why is this important? And you're stuck. I don't know. It just seems to be the case. So as you're going through this process, make note of everything that you're saying to yourself. Have a pen and paper there and write down all of the questions and answers that you're probing with. As you do this, you'll discover a list of assertions. If I fail, people will think I'm a failure. That's an assertion. If I fail, I will think I'm a failure. If people see me as a failure, they will reject me. These are all assertions about what will happen based upon what is true in life. So this is really important, the ability to look for and identify assertions. And this is where our regular study practice is really important, because the key aspect of having a study practice is listening for the author to make statements of truth. Selfishness breeds discontent. The job during our study practice is to identify, there's an assertion, and question it. So the more we have a regular study practice, the more we will become skilled at identifying assertions. Once we have identified all of those assertions, that's when we can start to question. Is this statement true? Okay, now a slightly better question than that is, to what extent is it true? Let's go back to our two examples. People are critical and selfish. To what extent is it true? To some extent, because some people are critical and selfish. And where is it untrue? Well, it's not true in my family. I can kind of do anything and I'm always being supported. It's my workplace I'm worried about. You can start to identify areas where the assertions don't hold up. And then questioning means looking at the opposite. People are supportive and helpful. Is that true anywhere? Well, actually, my boss, she's great. She's always talking about, how can I help? How can I support you to do your job better? So, yeah, looking for the opposite belief as well. What we're doing here is putting our existing beliefs or assertions into their proper perspective. We have to then reflect those against our growth goals. A growth goal is something that takes me through and beyond that belief. So this means having an ideal. Setting ideals and what they are is something that we've talked about in the past, so I won't go into them in detail here. But essentially it means having a very clear vision that answers the question, who do I want to be? And what does that look like in action? What will it be like when I have moved through this challenge to be able to perform action in a particular way that requires me to level up, to grow beyond my existing set of beliefs? So reconnect back to your ideals, to your growth goals, If you don't have one, great. That's the next step. Identify that. And then the last part is begin to experiment. Failure is catastrophic. Where can I safely test this belief? Where can I grab for an opportunity and see what happens if I fail? Okay, my workplace, that's really the area that I'm most concerned about. I don't want to go testing it in there. It could be with regards to a sport that you play. It could be something in your family life. It could be something with regards to romantic relationships. It could be a whole host of other things that you can try out to see what happens so that you can get some real-time feedback as to what the outcome of that is and observe them consciously. This is what creates that sense of safety, is that you are doing it knowingly, willingly, with self-awareness and with a goal in mind. The second aspect of the experimentation is to have someone who can support you. Someone who knows what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the underlying beliefs are that you're trying to work through, and where you're trying to go. A trusted friend or loved one. It could be a supportive work colleague or boss. Someone who is invested in your well-being, invested in you succeeding here. Share your experience with them, your intentions, your fears, your goals. Get feedback from the experiment. Discuss it with them. So there's two quotes. The first is attributed to Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The thing that we are afraid of, once we move into that, it actually holds the thing that we want. When I continue to attempt to succeed at the opportunities, I actually begin to feel more secure within myself. The thing that I was wanting was in the cave that I was afraid to go into. So it's put in another way by the UFC fighter Conor McGregor. He says, the more you seek discomfort, the more comfortable you become. You become more comfortable, you become more familiar with discomfort. And so everywhere you go, you become more comfortable. What are our thought patterns? Their beliefs, their assertions. Letting go of them means updating them, upgrading them, so that we can live our life as freely as we would wish.